In this video, we're going to have a look at how to set up LAS X to be used with a generic microscope. For example, if you bought a Leica camera and you want to use it on a different brand of microscope or an older model of a Leica microscope, you need to set it up as a generic microscope. So we do this in the LAS X hardware configurator. So if you just installed LAS X, you will probably find this shortcut on the desktop. But if you can't find it, you just go through the Windows Start menu and you will find it there. So first thing up, we go into the hardware setup. This is where we tell the system what type of microscope we have. So we open up this little drop-down list here, and you can see that we have a bunch of Leica microscopes in here. But in this case, we have a non-Leica microscope, so I'm gonna pick the generic one. Next thing is we go in and we create a connection. So creating a connection means that we are creating our microscope. So we give it a name. I will call it microscope 1, and we press enter. And now we just pick the different options that we have on this system. So for example, the number of positions for the objectives. So I will say that we have 6 positions on this one. Incident light turret on this microscope. I will, for argument's sake, say that we have fluorescence. So I will have the fluorescence axis here. And let's say that we have 4 positions for that, for filter cubes. Do we have a condenser and condenser turret? I will say no, but if you do have, for example, phase contrast or a DIC, you most likely will want to have a condenser turret. DIC turret, do we have that one? I will say no in this case, but if you do, you pick it and you say the number of positions. Magnification changer, I don't have that either. I will leave that unticked. And then finally, I'm telling the system what contrast methods I have. So on this one, I have bright field. And if I did have dark field or polarization, DIC or phase contrast, I would just tick those ones too. And then we go over to incident light and I have fluorescence. Same thing here. If you do have bright field, dark field or DIC, you pick those. All right. So when this is set up like this, I'm done. So I can just close this. I can see that I have microscope 1 here, and I'm done at that point. So I just go OK. I go into the configure tab here, and this is where I configure my microscope. So I just told the system what type of microscope I have, and now I have to configure it. So here we have the components. We have the microscope. This is the generic microscope, and it's the microscope 1 here. We go into ports. So in the ports is where I select my tube and eyepieces and documentation port. So starting with the tube, most likely you won't find your specific tube in here. So you pick one that works for you, and most likely the important thing is the ports here. So you have a camera on your system, so you want to pick a tube that has a documentation port. So I'm gonna just pick this one. The other thing that might be important is the port states, and I will pick this one for simplicity. This one has only one port state. It's for a tube that has a 50-50 split, but this means that as when I go live and when I want to take images, I don't have to make any other changes in the software to have that working for me. So I will pick this one, double click on that, and we get that one up here. Next thing, we go to the eyepieces. So again, we just pick one that most closely resembles the one we have. I will pick this one. Double click, comes up here. Moving on to documentation port. And again, you won't probably find yours here. So I'm going to select one with the correct magnification and double click on that one. All right, so we've set up our ports. So moving on through the components here, I'm gonna go over here. don't know if you noticed, but moving away from ports, the camera icon came up here. And that's because before I configured the ports, the system was not configured with the documentation port. But as I set up the documentation port, it knows now that it has a camera, or it should have a camera anyway. All right, magnification changer, I don't have that, so I'm just gonna leave that and move over to the incident light turret. So in my case here, I have fluorescence. And so now I'm gonna pick the filter cubes that I have in here. If you can't find filter cubes that matches your filter cubes, you can also set up special filter cubes and design them yourself. That's a different video. You can see how that is done. So I will refer to that one, and I will just, in this case here, I will pick 3 filter cubes. I will take the DAPI filter cube. I will just go down here and go with the L5, which is basically a FITSI filter cube, and then I will go with the N3, which is basically a Texas Red filter cube, more or less. All right, so that's our filters. Moving on to the nose piece. Again, we have a list of objectives, a list of Leica objectives, and if you don't have Leica objectives, you can also use these universal ones to fill up your turret. So I'm gonna say that on this system we have a 4x objective, a 10x, 20x, and a 40x objective. All right. Last thing to do is to set up the cameras. So in this view here, I only have a demo camera and simulator. That's because I don't have a camera connected to this system. If you had your camera connected, it would come up in this list. You would see it with the model name and so on. So you would double click on that one. I'm gonna double click on the demo camera just to have my camera set up there. All right, so that's it. We have told the system what type of microscope we have, and we have also informed the system what configuration, so what objectives and filters and so on we have on it. So we are good to go. I'm gonna close down the hardware configurator, and we are ready to start LS X.